Neil Gaiman seems to be a fan of Charles Dickens. During his guest appearance in Season 3 of Staged, he recommends that David and Michael do a live Christmas Carol stream. On December 18th of 2023, just a few days from the release of this video at the Town Hall in New York, Mr. Gaiman will be playing the role of Charles Dickens, a role he is reprising from a beloved performance he did in 2023 at the New York City Library. On a recent rewatch of Episode 3 of Season 2, particularly the minisode portion, The Resurrectionist, I noticed certain parallels to this very famous holiday parable, A Christmas Carol, and I wondered if it's quite on purpose on Mr. Gaiman's part. Of course, it's not a direct retelling. For one thing, it takes place in October, but it does seem to share many of the same themes, plot elements, settings, and even character similarities. So as a little bit of a holiday special, today we're going to compare the themes and story elements of the minisode, The Resurrectionist, to Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. A Christmas Carol is 180 years old as of this Christmas, 2023, and yet it remains one of the most popular holiday stories and is retold and remade endlessly. How many versions of A Christmas Carol exist in movies, stage plays, even musicals? There are Muppets, there are cartoons, there are versions where characters sing and dance on Scrooge's coffin, which I love. Although there exist very modern retellings, such as Bill Murray's Scrooged, the vast majority of retellings keep the Victorian London setting. It's a period of Western history that works exceedingly well as a setting for the themes this story explores. Both A Christmas Carol and The Resurrectionist take place in Great Britain. Scotland had joined England to form this union in 1707, and it takes place near the last half of the First Industrial Revolution. Let's explore this setting and see why it's so perfect for this particular parable. I don't think the similarities in setting are superficial. Dickens' novel was published in 1843. It concerns an aging miser who must learn the error of his ways before it's too late. Too late for him, and too late for those people whose lives he has the power to positively affect. It takes place in the wake of the First Industrial Revolution, which drastically changed Western society. Many rural folk were forced off their farms and into crowded, squalid city living conditions. The wealth gap increased dramatically, with the poorest 65% of British citizens only receiving about 4% of the country's total income. Poorhouses, workhouses, and debtors' prisons popped up like vile mushrooms as society tried desperately to wrangle with a rapidly changing society and a huge population of people in dire financial circumstances. Dickens, who had suffered himself in a workhouse when he was a boy, wrote A Christmas Carol in the hopes that it might enlighten more people to the horrid working and living conditions in Victorian England, and change the hearts and minds of those with the wealth and power. It was also a part of the revival of the Christmas holiday that was in full swing by the time of Queen Victoria and the 1840s, but began with Victoria's grandmother, who adopted some German customs into the royal household, such as the Christmas tree in the 1820s. The minisode, The Resurrectionist, takes place in 1827, more than 16 years before A Christmas Carol, but smack dab in the middle of the same period of social crisis. Here is the same extreme poverty, the same dramatic wealth gap, the same horrid living conditions, and a good portion of the story takes place in a graveyard, which is also where Scrooge's spiritual journey reaches its climax. But the setting isn't the only similarity. We can also see reflections of the same archetypal characters.
Every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled with his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his...
Some of you may be thinking, well, Scrooge and Aziraphale are not remotely similar, if that's where I'm going with this. And it's true, Aziraphale doesn't have a miserly spirit, or a dead business partner, or a lost love. Well, wait, he sort of has that last one, but that's a bit later in the story. He definitely is the character in Good Omens who has an incorrect moral view that must be shed to grow as a person and to become a better member of society. Crowley has many aspects of the three Christmas spirits. The spirit of Christmas past, of course, shows Scrooge a memory of his own past, which sheds light on how he became the person he is in the present day. And it's through a memory shared with Crowley that Aziraphale and the audience see the story of the Resurrectionist. The spirit of Christmas present comes to Scrooge to share with him the lessons he must learn to shed his immoral behavior and become a better person. This spirit is described in the novel as having the form of a jolly giant. He shows Scrooge the sweet but ailing Tiny Tim. In the book, and in many adaptations, this spirit also reveals to Scrooge two half-starved waifs that he names Ignorance and Want. This boy is ignorance, this girl is want. Beware them both and all of their degree, but most of all beware this boy, for on his brow I see that written which is doom, unless the writing be erased. Crowley, the demon who gave the knowledge of good and evil to mankind, would certainly agree that ignorance is something to be remedied. He is forever patiently helping Aziraphale overcome some of his more egregious ignorances, and by the end, he helps Aziraphale understand, at least a little better, the privation suffered by the poor all around them. The spirit of Christmas yet to come is usually portrayed as a figure of death. He is there to show the ultimate consequences of Scrooge's actions if he doesn't change his ways. There are 2 graves shown to him by this spirit, 2 deaths to come. One he may prevent, and one he cannot. He's shown the mourning parents of poor Tiny Tim, just 7 years old when he died, a preventable death, one that indeed Scrooge himself has the power to prevent. And he's shown his own tombstone. Of course, as a mortal man, his own death is inevitable, but it's how he is remembered and what happens to him after death that he still has some control over, a small chance to change. Aziraphale is immortal, so it's not his own death that he is shown, but 2 others. Crowley asks Aziraphale to meet him in a graveyard in Edinburgh. Crowley then helps Elspeth take the corpse to Mr. Dalrymple, where Aziraphale, thinking he will talk the surgeon out of what he sees as foul deeds, is instead told the story of the untimely death of a small 7-year-old unnamed boy. The surgeon, Mr. Dalrymple, explains that he tried to save the boy by removing a tumor, but failed, and that is why he needs the bodies. Surgeons like him must continue to study human anatomy so future little boys with tumors might live. Aziraphale clutches the tumor as if cradling the poor child himself, looking very distraught. He and Crowley return to the graveyard with Elspeth and her partner Wee Morag, only to see the latter shot by a grave gun and succumb to her wounds. This unnamed 7-year-old child and poor Wee Morag are the stand-ins for Tiny Tim, both unnecessary deaths, and one that Aziraphale himself could have prevented. If I'm going to keep playing this game of recasting A Christmas Carol, and why not, then I'm going to say that Gabriel and Jim serve as Marley, Scrooge's late business partner. As Gabriel, he really was awful, all under the guise of being a good boss. As Marley appears to Scrooge in the original book and many retellings as his door knocker near the beginning of the story, Gabriel shows up as a statue, representing the old, terrible Gabriel, while in the present day the new and kindly Jim, who is going through a sort of death and rebirth, shows up at Aziraphale's door in the very first act of the season with a warning about something bad that might happen to him. The warning of something bad coming, as in A Christmas Carol, applies to both parties. By the end of the season, Aziraphale definitely fears that same something bad that was after Gabriel might now be a danger to him and Crowley. Elspeth is the Bob Cratchit of this world, barely able to scratch out a living for herself and her little family, Wee Morag. At first, Aziraphale is a massive hindrance to Elspeth's attempts to get enough money to survive, but after Crowley helps him see the right of things, he gives away quite a sum of wealth to ensure her future survival and hopefully prosperity. If you asked 5 people what the themes of A Christmas Carol are, you might get 5 different answers. I want to propose 3 themes that I think are shared between these 2 tales. Scrooge is notoriously stingy. His name has become synonymous with the word, but it isn't just with money that we see this, but with his generosity of spirit. He never has a kind word to spare for his poor, overworked clerk, Bob Cratchit. He's unwilling to spend time with his nephew and his nephew's family, even though it wouldn't cost him a shilling. He mistakenly holds the view that people's stations in life are something they have earned and deserve. He doesn't care about the poor and the suffering. He's very callous of their plight. Aziraphale isn't stingy exactly, but he isn't generous with his material goods either. This isn't because he has a miserly spirit, but because he holds on to the mistaken notion that poverty is some sort of gift, that it somehow gives people like Elspeth more opportunities, more choices. He certainly isn't uncaring of the poor, but he's completely out of touch with the reality they live in every day. One of the major character arcs in both stories is a resolution to these misbegotten ideas about the poor. Both Scrooge and Aziraphale must learn to be more generous and understanding of the circumstances of those living in poverty.
I'm going to save her. I know it's not technically allowed, but this is all my fault.
A pretty big theme in A Christmas Carol and in The Resurrectionist is that of regret and transformation. Scrooge is shown his past, and there he's able to see how his growing greed and callousness cost him his fiancée and his own happiness. Later, he is shown how these traits might cause further suffering, harm, and even death, even past the ending of his own life. Scrooge is given a sort of carrot and a stick to help him change. The carrot is the ability to save the life of an innocent child. The stick is eternal punishment if he doesn't straighten up and become a better member of society. Naturally, Good Omens drops the Christian-specific moralizing in this story. There's no threat of punishment for Aziraphale. He only needs the carrot, only needs to see and understand the truth of the human suffering that he is perpetuating with his outdated notion that cutting up corpses is somehow wicked, in order to change his mind. Of course, there are still consequences to his earlier actions. Although he now sees getting bodies to the surgeon as a good thing, the fact that Elspeth and Wee Morag must continue to steal them, combined with the fact that the wealthy literally arm their burial sites to prevent this very occurrence, shows that this single lesson isn't enough. The root cause of poverty remains unaddressed. Without understanding that, Aziraphale accompanies the girls back to the graveyard where Wee Morag is shot by a grave gun. Here we start to see a slight departure in ideology. Although the theme of regret and transformation exist in both stories, they play out quite differently. Aziraphale, like Scrooge, comes to regret his earlier choices, but unlike Scrooge, he is unable to save the life he endangered with his wrong-headedness. Tiny Tim is saved, but Wee Morag dies. Despite Aziraphale's change of heart, the consequences of his earlier actions still play out. Now he knows real regret. He knows that her death is, at least in part, his fault. But his transformative journey is not complete. Elspeth's circumstances have not improved. Indeed, they've gotten much worse as she's now lost her partner, and the only escape she sees from her life of poverty and misery is death. It's interesting that, unlike Scrooge, who goes on to willingly share his wealth more freely, Aziraphale doesn't reach this conclusion on his own. Crowley has to point it out to him. Even when it's explained that her financial situation is surely going to lead to her early demise, Aziraphale is still stubbornly clinging to the idea that poverty is some kind of virtue. Crowley has to tell Aziraphale to give her the money he has.
How much, Dr. McFall?
About 90 guineas.
That should be enough. Give her that.
So one life is saved, but the larger underlying issues remain completely unaddressed.
Mankind should be our business, Ebenezer, but we seldom attend to it.
In both A Christmas Carol and in The Resurrectionist, we are confronted with cases of severe social injustice. Scrooge has enormous hoarded wealth, while Cratchit and his family can barely afford Christmas dinner. Elspeth and Wee Morag sleep in a piss-drenched alley and steal corpses, risking their very lives just to have the money needed for basic survival, while Aziraphale moralizes about the state of their poverty. There's no upward mobility for those born into poverty in the 19th century Britain. The wealthy and privileged have all the power and some really horrendous ideas about the poor.
Blood money. And what are you going to spend it on? Gin?
Aziraphale believes the poor have more opportunities and choices, but as Crowley says,
That's losing.
and must show Aziraphale the realities of their lives and deaths.
The rich can afford all this gubbins to protect their relics from being dug up, and the poor just have to lump it. You're okay with that, yeah?
Scrooge learns his moral responsibilities, to be a kinder boss, a more forgiving moneylender, a better family man. The Cratchits are given some social justice. They don't lose their youngest child to illness and malnutrition. Presumably, Bob Cratchit's new higher wages allow the family a better life going forward. Aziraphale learns some moral lessons as well, very specifically that surgeons need real corpses to study and that doing so is not wicked and sinful. Perhaps he learns that the poor do not have all the freedom of choice that he believed. Certainly, he learns that his actions can have extremely dire consequences for other people. Elspeth lives and heads off with 90 guineas in her pocket to hopefully start a new and better life. A Christmas Carol ends on a fairly positive note. The old miser has learned his lesson, and if we all do the same, the world will be a better place. He learns his lesson in time.
What day is it?
Today?
Today.
Why, Christmas Day, of course.
It's Christmas Day. I haven't missed it.
This era of good omens ends on a darker note. Although we can hope that Elspeth went on to become a prosperous farmer, she still lost her partner, and the little boy who had the tumor remains quite dead. And Crowley is sucked back down to hell as punishment for his good deed. As a matter of fact, I would say there's a sort of no good deed goes unpunished sub-theme going on here, where Aziraphale's attempts to do good end in death, Crowley saving the life of Elspeth end in some sort of unspecified hellish torture for him, and just to drive this point home, we later discover the surgeon was driven out of town and eventually met a very tragic end, and the episode as a whole ends on these extremely ominous lines.
It's always too late.
In both stories, we see a lesson learned by a single person, and the lives of a small handful of people are changed for the better as a result. In neither case do we have a real resolution to the underlying injustices. The institutional problems remain entirely unaddressed. Then again, how do we change the world for the better but one mind at a time? This minisode is already a little different from the others. Before the Beginning shows us the very first time Crowley and Aziraphale met, how their relationship began. The Companion to Owls shows some massive developments in both characters and their relationship, and it relates directly to what's going on in the present day of the show, similar to the 1941 zombie minisode, which foreshadows so very much. But the Resurrectionist doesn't show us development of their relationship so much as it shows a very specific moral lesson learned by Aziraphale and a massive social injustice perpetuated by the existing institutions left unresolved. A parallel for something we might see addressed in Season 3, the institutional problem referenced by Gabriel in the Metatron. Will this minisode really shine later when we finally see Crowley and Aziraphale's full character arcs? Like Scrooge, will they get to throw back their curtains and proclaim that it's not too late, that there's still time to live a better, happier life, that together they can and did change the world? I don't quite have my normal random thought for today. Today I would simply like to share with you this quote. "There is nothing in the world so irresistibly contagious as laughter and good humor." The point of A Christmas Carol isn't the Christmas spirit. Most people on the planet don't even celebrate Christmas. The point, my lovely viewers, is this. Share a smile, a laugh, a hug, a toast to good cheer to all the people of the world. I wish you happy holidays or just happy days. Do you have a favorite version of A Christmas Carol? There are many excellent adaptations out there, and I'd love to hear which ones you prefer and why. Congratulations to Bold and Bright for winning our Good Omens Holiday Trivia, and Jane for winning the Big Monthly Trivia. If I haven't said so recently, I want to thank all my friends and family too. My wonderful father who watches all my videos and invites his friends to do the same. My husband, who's been incredibly supportive while I go on this crazy Good Omens YouTube adventure. My daughter Silver, who takes time out of her day to help mod my Discord server. All the unbelievably talented and wonderful friends who also happen to be Discord mods. Joe Madge, Kamapuri, Bentley, and Madman D. And a special hug to Akari, who we're all sending best wishes to right now. Thank you to all my wonderful patrons, and to my lovely viewers. Thanks for watching.